This is the After Party. Your hosts are the Great Order and No White Guilt. The crown winner of last week is a double first place, no second place this week. And those crowns go to Slots and Never Caught Being Quiet. Both financially gifting $5 a piece. Thank you so very much. A big congratulations to you both. If you want to financially gift over the course of this stream, you can do so on Entropy, which will be up in a moment at a cost of 15% to you, as you all should well know. You can also financially gift on Cash App. Both of those URLs are in the description below. And again, Jared and I evenly share the financial gifts with our guests on the After Party. Today we have a absolute beloved crowd favorite, the Miss Sarah Dye, on tap with us. Sarah, please introduce yourself for those who may be new to our community, and we have new people showing up all the time. Tell them where they can find you, and Mr. George will bring us in to this wonderful conversation. Oh, you are muted. It's okay.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Hello again. It's good to see you both. And thank you so much for having me on tap again. It's been a while, and it's wonderful to be here. Did you want me to, what were you saying to, I think I missed part of that, Jason.
Well, you could that's pretty much your Sarah Dye, and maybe another fact about you and where folks can find you.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Well, I am a mother, a homeschooler and wife to my husband. We own Schooner Creek Farm, and we have been farming organically for a little over 10 years now. We have a small business where we are growing and selling and hand cultivating just all sorts of beautiful food and produce. We raise eggs for chickens on our homestead. I also have, in collaboration with Carissa Dogo, a podcast that we started a little over a year ago called Hearth and Helm. And that is a podcast that right now, because we're both busy mamas, we're streaming maybe once or twice a month max, but we cover a wide range of topics, everything from homesteading to child rearing, natural parenting, holistic living and holistic parenting, high investment parenting, which I could, touch on later. A wide range of topics, all of those things I mentioned, including ancestral health and relationship stuff, controversial issues, and politics kind of come into play here and there, but we kind of try to keep it on a positive beat most of the time. And we, just wanted to kind of put our heads together and share what we have learned over the years, but also learning in public, if I could borrow the name of Jared's other fantastic podcast.
You can do so. You have my blessing.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we're learning together with, our listeners and our community. So that's a couple of the things that are part of who I am. And I'm sure people are familiar. We've been struggling a little bit over the past couple of years with some issues that came about due to doxing and anti-whites attacking our business, our family, and our farm. But yeah, we're, it's springtime. We are really getting an awesome start to the year and pouring a lot of love into this place that we're at right now, blooming where we're planted. And honestly, regardless of how challenging all of that saga with Schooner Creek Farm has been over the past almost 2 years now, you kind of rise above, and this spring we have just been so filled with inspiration, and we are just really working hard and getting out there and getting the crops in the ground. And we've had some excellent feedback from the community. And also, I can't announce tonight, unfortunately, but I do want to just say that stay tuned, because Schooner Creek Farm has a very exciting announcement coming up here in the coming weeks. So yeah.
We look forward to hearing about that. So you are on tap. I'm pulling up your file. We are very organized white men. The afterparty.tv, I think you all know what I'm about to say, is where you should bookmark and think of our show first, before YouTube, before even places like Odyssey, as promising as Odyssey is, because that's where we have control. Right now, I'm putting Sarah's first appearance on tap into the D Live and the YouTube chats. So if you want to hear the full story of how Sarah and her family were targeted by anti-whites and the harassment, and if I may say, we've acknowledged this before, so I know it's not out of turn, but Sarah, you do have an amazing story and an amazing testimony of coming from a different place. We all come here from different places, have different experiences, and you were running in some, as you would even say, some anti-white circles, and the journey you took and the realizations you had. So it was a killer episode, killer in the good sense of the word. I hope people in the UK use that word too, like we do in the States, right? It's killer, it's good, like surfing, killer wave, bro. But since then, Jason has welcomed Sarah onto his Going Free stream, and Sarah has joined us as a panelist on fun multi-guest holiday streams. But this is her first Tap episode since last June, when it was kind of the getting to know you, kind of that every time someone's on Tap first, it's an interview, and we try to go deep into what they're about and how they got here. So of course, some of that can weave back in. We might have new people today, but I mentioned that to say, if you like this lady as much as we do, and we think you all will, and you want to hear more of her story, please go check out her first appearance on the afterparty.tv. But there's so much that we didn't get to when you were back in June. And as I said, I have my trusty notes because we're all very well organized here. So we already had highlighted things that we didn't get to, and of course some new things too. So we'll try to do as much as we can today. But even having said that, it's still kind of free form now that you're back on. There's a lot of people here who are familiar with you, and so we definitely encourage the chat listening live. Send in your questions. But there's two things that we'll start with that you've indicated already that people are very interested in that you can speak to, and that's homesteading and homeschooling. So we've had requests for those topics in general, and then specifically from you, people knowing that you practice these things, they want to hear it from you. So we could take it from there and then see what the chat wants to talk about. And of course, we have some other notes and things we can talk about in the time we have tonight. But homesteading, so my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is definitely not my area of expertise. Now, you have a business, as you said, you have a farm. But some people might not run it as a business. Some people might just want to grow some of their own food just so that they're a little less reliant on grocery stores and they're closer to their own supply chain, more independence. Maybe they do things like trade with neighbors. You grow certain things, I grow certain things, and we trade. So again, not my area of expertise. So I don't even know if this is the best question to start with. So definitely help me along here. You were Jason, but the only thing I can think to begin with is, well, if someone's new to it, and let's say they're living or they're moving to a semi-rural or rural area, obviously you need some space. Like, what are the first things that someone would have to consider, a family would have to consider, even if they just want to do a little operation, as I said, growing their own food? What are some of the preparations they need to make? What are some skills they would need to start learning? And what are maybe some surprises that you might not think of, but you need to be ready for since you've gone through this?
That's a fantastic question. First of all, I wanted to say I'm glad that you're organized, because I am not organized at all today. As I said, it is springtime, so there's a lot going on the farm, and simultaneously, my husband and I are remodeling our house. And in addition to that, baseball season just got underway, and I now have 2 baseball players in my family. So that is an exciting time. I can touch on that a little bit later, but that's kind of a part of it, is working together as a family. So I would say first and foremost with homesteading, it's a very, let's say, it's a term that has a lot of different interpretations. We are the type of homesteaders to where our goal is that we want to grow as much of our own food as we can. We are raising eggs. We are working towards being more self-reliant, but we are still very much plugged into our local community and our national, our nation, as far as needing to pull resources for the farm. Like, for instance, my husband and I are not out there with scythes, cutting our own hay. We aren't completely self-sufficient as a lot of, like, say, Amish communities are in that way, but it's a goal to grow as much of our own food as we can. And I would say that with Schooner Creek Farm, I think that really a lot of the times with these, businesses like ours, they come about because you're already growing a lot of food. So to be able to sell a little bit on the side to make a little extra money is a nice thing. But then you find that if your business does well, then you grow more to expand that business. So that's kind of how we've grown Schooner Creek Farm slowly over the years. And I would certainly say that it's a fantastic idea for people who, once you do have your vegetable garden established or you're raising chickens, it's a great way to make a little bit of extra money on the side, even if you aren't going to have a full-scale small business doing it like we are. But, a lot of my mom friends are starting to get into raising chicks and, selling eggs and at a little roadside stand or herbs and things like that. So that can be good. But as far as getting established and getting started, I would say, well, as I said, homesteading is a term that has many interpretations. So you can do things on a very small scale. You don't necessarily, I don't want people to be discouraged if they don't have their dream farm or 5 acres or 10 or 100 acres. You can do a lot on 1 acre. Heck, you can do a lot just in a city backyard if that's your situation. And I know a lot of people are stuck in that situation. But let's say if you are in a situation where you have, say, 1 or 2 or 3 to 5 acres, then I guess my first suggestions would be to get a soil test. It's very important to have a soil test done because that will tell you if you have any major deficiencies, which is extremely important to know before planting crops. Most soils don't have extreme deficiencies, and you can kind of get by with just adding some finished compost, and some basic fertilizers, and we don't use any synthetic fertilizers. Obviously, it's important to us that we're not putting that into our soil. But when I say fertilizers, I mean like perhaps fish emulsion or seaweed extract. Those are 2 natural fertilizers that we use. Soil test would be one of my first suggestions. And I guess another first suggestion would be to, if you just really want to get a garden going, laying down some tarps, or sometimes if people want to do it all natural, they'll do cardboard and straw. So you kind of want to mark out your garden area and start killing back the sod, start killing back the weeds and the grass to prepare your area. I could go on and on. This is a very wide topic, but
what about surprises? So things that people might not think of, but that they likely will encounter once they start this adventure.
Well, there's a lot of things to consider. If you're thinking about purchasing land, I would say that looking at water is very important. Does the land have a spring, a natural spring on it, or a creek or a well? Those are all really huge bonuses to have a nice fresh water supply. If you do have a well, of course, you'll want to research how deep it is because you don't want to run it dry when you're out there watering your garden. I have a friend who that happened to, unfortunately. Of course, the well did refill, but that was kind of a surprise that they had. You also want to look at the flow of water. Do you have a floodplain area? I would also pay attention to, your cardinal directions. Which direction is the sun rising and setting? And that will give you an idea of how you want to orient your rows of, in your vegetable garden, because you don't want to plant tall things next to, low growing things that are going to be shaded. But sometimes that can actually be a positive thing. For instance, lettuces don't like a lot of heat in the summer. So sometimes we'll intentionally plant something tall on the west side of the lettuces so that they're shaded slightly by the afternoon sun. So looking at, where does the sun rise? Where does the sun set? Another surprise you might want to consider is looking out for black walnut trees. These are trees that grow all over North America. And I believe that there is a species that grows in Europe as well, if I'm not mistaken. But they're very common here in the United States. And those trees, black walnuts, they exude a chemical called, I think it's juglone, through their roots that actually inhibits the growth of a lot of vegetable plants. Now, if you have black walnuts around your garden, don't be too discouraged. There are some plants that can thrive just fine with black walnuts around, but that's something, you might want to look out for. I also want to say that sourcing materials to continue to feed your garden, sourcing materials locally is something I would recommend. So reaching out to your farming community, your Amish, connecting with some of these. There's huge groups on Facebook for, farm networking. So if you're looking for hay bales or straw or manure, horse manure at the local stable, sometimes they'll sell it to you or deliver it to your farm. So sourcing materials is a big one, because those are necessary if you're not able to produce all of that on your own, which is the situation that we're in. I mean, again, like I said, some people are able to close all of those loops. So that's been a goal of ours as well. In the past, we've had sheep and goats, so we were able to have manure from them. So that kind of closes that loop on the homestead. Anything you're not having to outsource is ideal. But I would say, as far as first starting out, chickens and a vegetable garden are top priorities. I mean, I could keep going. I wanted to talk about perennials as well. Getting some perennial vegetables established is a great thing to do.
What are some examples?
Well, I will just tell you, a lot of people who've started out on their homesteads, who've waited. Let's say you're there and you rush and get your vegetable garden in, and you rush to get your chickens going. Well, next thing you know, you're 4 or 5 years in, and you think, darn, I wish I would have planted something like asparagus or blackberries or dwarf fruit trees or that sort of thing my first year, because then you can start to reap the benefits that much sooner. So those are some of the perennial crops. Chinese chestnut trees are actually, at least in my region, I'm in the Midwest, they are very hardy across most of the United States, and I would imagine Europe as well. They're not invasive. In the United States, as I'm sure many people know, we had our native chestnut trees die out due to disease, which was heartbreaking. But the Chinese chestnut is a different tree, but it does produce delicious nuts. So if you're wanting to produce nuts on your homestead and you don't have, say a lot of like pecan trees or naturally growing native nut trees like hickories or something like that, Chinese chestnuts are great. They grow really quickly. They produce a large amount of nuts, and that's a nice perennial crop to plant. So yeah, getting perennial crops established is a good idea.
That makes sense. I didn't know anything about the black walnut kind of potentially killing other things around it. I do know that when you take an extract from it, it actually inside you works well to kill parasites and things like that.
Yeah.
So
yes, absolutely.
good thing to look into, because we all need to be careful about those things. I also appreciate, of course, that it's organic. I eat organic wherever I can. We have to really be aware that we're not putting chemicals into our bodies and genetically manipulated material into our bodies and throwing ourselves off. What we're about here, being as healthy as you can be, mind, body, spirit. So kind of related to that, we'll jump to homeschooling, because that's a form of health as well. But anyone, again, in the chat, Sarah's been on before. We've gotten to know her a little bit, so it's a little more free-flowing tonight. People in the chat, if you have questions about what we're talking about, we can always get back for a moment to homesteading and the farming material as well. And if we don't, just remember, this is the kind of information that you could expect from Sarah and her friends, from Hearth and Helm, a lot of other things as well, of course. That's what we're about to get into. But clearly, this is just a little wet your whistle kind of thing. We can't, with Sarah's knowledge and experience, we could have, I'm sure, several shows just on homesteading if we wanted to.
Yeah, easily. I just wanted to also add, as we move into segue into the next portion, is that you can find a lot of manure on television as well. So if you are in need of that for your farm, the anti-whites provide it in abundance.
Unfortunately, it doesn't help. That kind of manure doesn't help plants grow.
That's probably right. That's true.
That's the thing. I see there's a scroller down here. This is new. Jason, were you working with your elves in the background as Sarah and I were talking for the last few minutes?
Yes. I had them. I put them to work, and now we have this little scroller that might come and go.
I like this. TAP is the best party you've ever attended. Well, we're not shy here, I guess, folks. But again, homeschooling, get your questions in, everybody. I know, again, people are interested. I'm looking at the chat, are interested right now. And certainly in the past, we've had requests for this kind of material. Oh, so homeschooling, where would we begin on that? I guess the same kind of just general frame of maybe how did you prepare for it and what were some surprises? What are the things that you couldn't really expect until you started doing it and you kind of had to adjust with your children and you yourself learn along the way to better structure it and make it more effective?
Yeah, fantastic question. Again, I could go on and on. Well, I would say that from the beginning, when my husband and I decided to make a family and have children, we knew that we would want to homeschool. For even back then, I was still kind of in my anti-white days, but even then I knew that I didn't want them in public school. I had intuitively picked up on a lot of the negative aspects that come from public school. And, now over the years, I've been able to kind of fine tune those feelings and those thoughts, and they're explained much more, clearly now. But we knew all along we wanted to homeschool. But I would say that when my eldest was 5, I tried putting him in a kindergarten class just for the quote unquote socialization, just because, I was here with him most of the time. And I thought, well, he needs other kids and, on a regular basis, that would be good. Well, I ended up pulling him out after a couple of months because it was a really negative experience. There was basically the workload for a 5-year-old child. It was very unnatural. And I also found a fantastic play group at the time. And a play group is, a homeschool play group. For those that don't know, it's just essentially parents, and it's typically moms, but sometimes fathers too, parents just who get together on a weekly basis or consistent basis with the kids and take them to the park. So it was like I realized I didn't need kindergarten in order to socialize my child. And really the socialization issue is a non-issue when it comes to homeschooling. Homeschool kids are some of the most well-adjusted and smart children and most pleasant to be around that you've ever met, really. I believe that the whole issue of the socialization thing, it's put on parents as a way to kind of scare them and to scare them away from homeschooling. It's a myth. And I would also say I read a book by John Taylor Gatto back when my eldest was an infant, and it was called Dumbing Us Down. And that book certainly changed my life. I highly recommend it. It's a very quick, very easy, very fun read. And he was a pretty amazing guy who really did a lot for the homeschool community and tried to affect change positively for public school as well. But one of the most memorable things that I recall from that book was that you can teach someone to read in such amount of hours. I don't remember the exact amount of hours, but they had conducted studies, and actually they were referring back to, it was an old study, but anyhow, he brought home the point that it is not natural for a child to be sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day for their entire childhood indoors and only with other kids their same age. That's very unnatural if you think about it. I mean, in the old days, children were very much engaged with the elderly in their community, whether it was their own grandparents or elderly neighbors or aunts and uncles and other young children, babies and toddlers, right? So they were getting this very well-rounded, dynamic upbringing, and therefore they were more well-adjusted as adults too, and also more prepared for parenthood. And so these were some of the things from John Taylor Gatto's book that I absolutely loved. And by the time I had, plucked my son out of the kindergarten, I'll never forget, it was a gorgeous autumn day. And 75 degrees, the leaves were changing. It was so beautiful. And I was at home working and he was at class. And I thought, I can't stand the thought of my 5-year-old being in a classroom right now. I'm just going to go, we're going to play hooky. I'm going to take him to the park. And that's what we did. We went to our first homeschool play group and I never turned back. It was so great. And of course, connecting with the other homeschool parents too. Talk about just, as soon as you find a group, I just want to encourage people, as soon as you find a good homeschool group, they will answer all of your questions. You will have so much at your fingertips as far as what type of curriculum you want to choose, what type of teaching style you want to do. And those things can vary from child to child. Some children do really well with the Charlotte Mason teaching method, which is very much literature based, and the arts and that sort of thing. Other children may thrive with just doing the grind with some really intense math, like just grinding the math problems all day, staring at a book, or grinding away at math all day. So there's different teaching styles. There's just really so much available. And so the myth that like homeschooling is only for the parents who've gone to school to be teachers, that's a myth. The myth that they're not going to be socialized. There's so much fear around it. But I would say really quickly, I think you have a question, Jared, but I wanted to say that on a positive note, I really do think that it has shifted drastically. I think that a lot of those myths are kind of being debunked nowadays.
You said something. We have a couple of questions in the chat, but I first just want to key in on something you said for a moment, because it actually was in the notes. I guess you have spoken about this topic for a while, nested within this topic of homeschooling, and I think it was a holdover from the first time you were on tap, as mentioned last June, and that is experiential learning. So I have no idea what the politics of such schools are, but I have read, at least the methodology was interesting to me. I have read literature in the past that speaks about, especially for boys. I was reading a book about this. You see it more in the German-speaking areas of Europe, Germany, of course, and then the Germanic parts of Switzerland and Austria as well, where instead of reading about a tree, they go out and you have the lesson about that tree and how that tree works in front of that tree. And you touch that tree, you're out in that tree. And they do a lot of lessons outdoors year round, in winter, in the snow. Obviously, the only time that they go and take shelter is when there's lightning. So that's dangerous, but snow's not dangerous. It's healthy to be out in the cold too.
Yes.
What can you tell us, before we get to these questions, what can you tell us about experiential learning, and especially with boys? I mean, anyone that knows me, hears Jason and I speak and has been around here for a little while, I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised to hear that I'm a curious person. I love to learn. I was a bit of a sponge, and I asked questions all the time when I was a kid, and I don't think I ever got out of that phase. But I couldn't sit in a little desk. I remember asking my teacher to go to the bathroom, and I went to a elementary school where there weren't hall monitors, and I would just walk around the school. Like, even in 4th grade, I was just like, I need to get out of here. And I would, on the pretext of going to the bathroom, I would like walk. There were just 2 floors, and I'd take a 5-minute just stroll around the school at all the classes we're in. And only once or twice teachers were like, are you supposed to be doing this? And I'd be like, oh yeah, I just had to bring a message to the principal's office or something. But I needed to get out, it's not, I agree. And for anyone who talks about kids not being socialized, I'm sure one response would be too, how were people educated, and how was knowledge passed on from one generation to the other in most of our history? We didn't have these little industrial schools where you sat at a desk for 6 hours a day. But what can you tell us briefly about experiential learning? And then we have a couple of questions from the chat as well.
Oh yeah, it's my favorite. I think it's the most effective for most children. I've yet to meet a child who didn't learn better using the more hands-on experiential learning approach. And we try to implement that in our homeschool as often as possible. Waldorf, the Rudolf Steiner Waldorf stuff. I know you and I had, I think, briefly chatted about that.
I had cousins that went to one, and a friend sent his daughters there for a little while. But you can meet different types of people there. It kind of touches on a question someone has in the chat about politics and the kinds of people you meet at those schools. But go on for a minute about the experiential.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with the Waldorf crowd. It's mixed, but my co-host on Hearth and Helm coined the hashtag "Make Crunchy Moms Great Again," and we laugh because The fact is, a lot of those themes are, as you said, very much based in some of the older German schools and, the old ways of our folk. This is how children were taught. You see these lovely paintings of the teacher taking the class outside for an afternoon, these old paintings, and that's well known. That's one of the reasons I love Charlotte Mason as well. She advocated for that, taking the class outdoors, take an afternoon walk every day with the children, and yeah, it's amazing. We're fortunate to have a creek on our property. So daily our children are back there and, we go back there with them and we're turning over stones and finding salamanders. And, then we can come back in and, reference our nature encyclopedias later and figure out what was that bug that we found. Oh, that makes sense that it's only around this time of year and not that time of year. And it makes sense that it was eating that creature because, and we can reference the books too. So it can be incorporated. And I also would say too that as far as higher education goes, I'm kind of skipping around here, but you did mention in the beginning, if you wanted me to touch on surprises, a lot of people they say to themselves, well, I'll homeschool for elementary and maybe like middle school, but high school, I'm going to put them in high school. Please don't do that. I mean, I cannot imagine doing that to your child. I certainly will not be doing that. Now, there may be subjects which I'm going to, admit that they're going to be challenging for me to teach. If I'm not capable, I will not hesitate to find a tutor for those things. And really now there's so much available online. There are high school classes available online as well. So if there's something you need to supplement, but as far as that experiential learning, oops, I'm sorry. I need to pause for a second. I'll be right back.
Quite all right. Jason.
Indeed. Yeah, I'll jump in, and I want to mention that one of the things that is so very important to the work that we are doing in service to white well-being is Brant Danger's School of the West. Yes. And so I'd like for homeschoolers, I mean, if we could have a perfect scenario, I'd like for homeschoolers all around the world to reorient the work that they're doing to incorporate School of the West and the inoculation powers of Go Free for our white children. Because even though, and I got to say this because I've been, and I'll, like Sarah's back with us, so I'll just hand it right back and we just keep it running, that we have far too many people, and I'll continue having this debate, I know, until the end of time, who think that, well, if we just get away from and then they'll throw, instead of saying anti-whites, they'll say the communists or the Marxists or the Wokes brigade or whatever. If we just get away from these people, well, then everything will just be fine. It won't be fine. It won't be fine. This idea, and it's a similar idea to the concept from these antique nationalists that say, well, if you just remove this one little blockage, well, then everything is just perfect after that. You just remove this one little blockage and everything's fine. No, both of these scenarios presuppose that we had a system in place that made us into a single people with many nations. We did not. We will easily be undermined. And you saw, and you still see, and you continue to see the ways that we are undermined in places like South Africa and similar locales across the West, either larger or smaller. You see how we continue to be undermined because we do not have a psychological defense for the psychological warfare. So, I mean, I can be kind of blunt for everybody, I can do it all at once, for the Christians, for the pagans, for the atheists. I can try to say, it doesn't matter how many times you pray to Christ, you're still going to lose. It doesn't matter how many horns of mead you pour out, you're still going to lose. It doesn't matter how many times that you say, well, we're going to just approach everything rationally and ethically, and we'll just examine everything. You're still going to lose, because there is a poison crafted to defeat us, and we were defeated by it. So we're never getting out of this until we have that defense against the poison that's crafted for us. So when we have homeschooling, and I know there are probably some moms and dads out there who will hear this in replay or maybe even live, and they'll be thinking, well, no, I think if we just teach people to be good, if we just teach our kids to be good, if we just teach them, and everything will be fine. We don't have to add this other bit to it. It's not going to be fine. the West will continue in flames, heading toward the earth, until we are able to be out of that anti-white narrative and into the place where we write ourselves in as the heroes. And your children, quite frankly, you can have them home and you can teach them mathematics at home. You can teach them literature at home. You can tell them how wonderful European lore is at home. And then the moment they are exposed to anti-whiteism that says everybody else in the world believes that the white people, Western kind, are evil and that they're responsible for all of these institutions, and that it's, of course, your parents said that European lore was great, and that's because it was handed down to them by evil people as well. Your children will succumb. Period. I've seen it for decades now. I've seen children raised in hardcore white positive or white sympathetic environments, and they turn against their parents. Hardcore. So if you do not, and there are some very public ones as well that ran off with lots of money. So it's the whole gamut of people who are unknown all the way up to people who are infamous now to us. But I can't stress enough, because I was just talking about, on PWR, we had, I spent quite a long time responding to a gentleman who screwed up his life, jeopardized the welfare of his 4 children because he spoke in a way that comported with some, I wouldn't necessarily say antique nationalist, but certainly speaking like the villain in the anti-white narrative. And now the anti-whites, of course, have slit his throat for it very easily. And who's suffering? Not just he and his wife, but children as well. And so we cannot have this anymore. This is the kind of thing that infuriates me. And I'm going to be passionate about it. Oh, well, I'm going to be passionate about it because I know what works. And I know that over all of these years, I wish I had been more pushy with other adults that said, oh, no, it's going to be okay with my kids if we don't teach them these inoculations. We just teach them the old ways. Bravo, Sierra. It's not going to be okay. So having said that, Brand Danger, School of the West, it's glorious. The first stage is to supplement homeschooling, and to do so, make that available to everybody on planet Earth. And of course, the dream long range, and I can inspire people a little bit. The dream long range is that we eventually have a physical school and or schools where you have big marble statues and everything. And I can say that there's at least one investor with some money who might be interested in something like that in the future. And with that little bit of encouragement, I pass it back.
Well, yes, we certainly need inoculations against the poisons. And that is what so much of Jason's work is about and what he's given us. Sarah, do you have anything to say to that? Or I can get to some of the questions that had come in thus far.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great summary, and that's very inspiring. I have looked at the School of the West and also the some of the homeschool curriculum that Patriotic Alternative has produced, and I need to start printing some of that out and incorporating it. I have yet to do that, but that is wonderful, and it's kind of one of those things where, we need people working together to produce that. For years I've wanted to kind of start creating some curriculum of my own as well, and I haven't got around to it. So I love that people are doing that, and can't wait to check it out.
Yeah, it's amazing to see all of these initiatives, all of these self-starters, and that's what happens when people have the antidotes, when their mind is free and their spirit can soar and their natural talents and curiosities can take them to the different places where they're best equipped to give back. This is what we see. We see a culture happening. It's not just politics. Politics is nested within life itself, within culture. We're regenerating life and creating a culture here, and we need all of this. So that's why we love having these conversations with all sorts of people, hitting all of these different angles. And certainly what we're talking about today fits squarely within that. So we had a question in the chat, first saying, Sarah, do you find that other homeschooling parents share your politics, or do you find them to be rather diverse in their leanings? Are there different folk who reach your same conclusions ultimately?
Well, in my physical community, the homeschool group I mentioned previously that we had first found. It was an absolute gem at the time that we found it. There were little to no politics, but I guess I would say over time I came to realize that it was dominated by almost entirely, actually, aside from myself, it was dominated with radically anti-white, or or also known as leftist moms. And we obviously are not a part of that homeschool group at all anymore. And I remember one of the last times I went, that was, gosh, I mean, one of the final straws. I mean, the children were still young. I think my son was around 6, and he comes running up, and this little girl comes running up, and they're having an argument. So they're telling the moms, asking for help to solve their conflict. And the disagreement they were having was that the daughter was telling my son that he could be a girl if he wanted to, and was questioning him, was questioning him when he was saying he was a boy, and was, trying to convince him that maybe he wasn't a boy. And I just thought, wow, I mean, these kids are 6 years old. I mean, look at and I mean, I could go on and on, but I'm not going to go on and on, but there were certainly many other examples like that where and again, I was still not quite fully aware of anti-whiteism at the time. So it was kind of like a cumulative thing. And finally I was like, yeah, no way. We are not going to be in this playgroup anymore. So I would say that the playgroups that we find ourselves in now, I tend to be in the minority in that I'm not Christian. I'm of the Northern European ethnic folk faith, but my Christian mom friends are so kind and so normal, and they don't bring politics into our homeschool group at all. I mean, and if they do, they tend to be very rationally minded about things. And it's not explicit, I guess I would say. There's more of an implicit understanding that, we are not going to be pressing any sort of LGBTQ garbage or any other anti-white garbage on the kids. But it's a huge variety. And I guess I would just say you really have to try some different groups, get plugged in, get involved with your state group, and then kind of narrow it down from there all the way down to your region and your county and your town, and find a good fit. There's a lot of great homeschool moms out there, or homeschool parents, I should say, that you will connect with, who most likely share your politics.
Well, speaking of friends you connect with, your friend and partner in Hearth and Helmet, Lady Lazarus, is in the DLive chat. Nice to see you. And she may well know about this subject herself, so she might be putting it in the chat more for other people's sake. But tips for homeschooling children of larger age gaps.
That's a challenge. It's still a challenge for me today, and I've been homeschooling for years. I would say the only thing I can do is try to forgive myself on the days that we don't get everything done that I wanted to get done. Try not to be too hard on yourself. It is challenging, I would say. So, I mean, my kids are, I have a, 5th grader and a kindergartner, and then I also have a toddler. So those are very, very different ages. It's really nice in some ways when your kids are closer, because you can teach both the same curriculum together and kind of help the younger one catch up, and then make the curriculum for the older one more complicated. So right now we are doing very separate stuff. I would say the one advantage is that I don't really push the academic stuff. I don't start pushing that until age 7, which is fine by law in my state. And it's also much more natural when you start looking into the older traditional forms of education, and like the Charlotte Mason and Waldorf and some of those teachings. It's not really natural to push academics too young on children. So my biggest focus right now is with my eldest, just because he is much more involved in the academic stuff. So I do small but meaningful activities with the younger ones. So the morning time is typically their time. And, we'll do like a 5 to 10 minute reading lesson. And, sometimes it's a success, with the younger ones, and sometimes it's crazy because, little kids sometimes they'll sit down and they want to pay attention, but other times they're just raging, especially for me having boys. But small, meaningful activities for the younger ones is what I try to do in the mornings. And then the middle part of the day and afternoon is I'm much more focused on the older ones. Another thing I do is I try to bring So I keep the toys for my youngest mostly put away in storage in a closet, and I just bring out like one new basket of toys each week. So I'm rotating them. I know a lot of parents will just have all the toys out all the time, but then the kids aren't interested and it's too overstimulating. So for my toddler, this was a tip another homeschool mom gave me to keep him occupied and happy. I'll rotate those baskets out. So it's kind of new for him each week. So he's occupied while I can help the older kids with school. Another thing that my toddler will like to do while I'm teaching the older ones is play in the sink. So as long as it's safe, I'll give him the cups and the measuring cups and spoons and a little bit of the, eco-friendly dish soap to make bubbles. And then he'll have a blast playing in the sink. And, yes, it gets messy, but you can clean up the mess afterwards, right? In the winter months when it's a little too cold for everybody to be outside for a large amount of time, you could do an indoor sandbox. That's another thing I've done for the younger ones before. So, I try to think of creative ways to keep them happy and busy so that I don't just have to sit them in front of a cartoon or a screen, which I do. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not like a total Puritan here, but I'm very selective about what's on that screen. And sometimes, there have been times when I have to just, put on a Little Bear episode or something for the toddlers. But yeah, as far as suggestions for multiple ages, again, experiential learning, that's where that comes into play too.
Yeah.
That's another great benefit to experiential learning, going outside and studying something as a group together. Well, the little one can be running around screaming and climbing a tree and playing, but you can still be teaching some more intense stuff to the older one,
Three boys, mama.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, it gets very chaotic around here. So that's my excuse for the scatterbrain.
Well, I'll just quickly say in the chat, Carlisle, who's here all the time, I didn't know this, but she said she is actually the product of being homeschooled. And you were talking about the more academic later years. Her parents must have done something right. And Jason, I don't know if they were reading early copies of Go Free or they just had the right instincts, because she said that they instilled the right values in her. And on the academic end, I hope I'm not embarrassing you, Carlisle, and bragging on your behalf, but I'll say it, so it's okay. Went off to college at 16, okay, and now is contributing, and obviously she's in the right place. I'll sound like I'm bragging on me and Jason's behalf now. So I think that that's a wonderful success story. I just wanted to celebrate that. It was typed in the chat, so I don't think she'd mind me saying that. And maybe if you're both comfortable, if you want to be put in touch, I like connecting people, as you know. If you want to ask her maybe about what her parents did as your boys get older and they get into those more advanced years. Obviously, her parents did something right, but that's all. She's saying thank you in the chat, so it's okay that I said that. I try to be very mindful about people's privacy. We all have to share certain things and don't share other things. But as I said, since it was in the chat, I thought it was appropriate to share. So hats off to Carlisle's parents. That's great. And she's such a tremendous member of the community here. She's here all the time. What about this idea? Just one more thing on this with the age gap. You mentioned me and John Bruce Leonard do Learning in Public. And I have actually on the list of shows that we want to do, I might screen share a video that's very interesting, play some of it and then discuss it, play some of it and then discuss it. I saw this video on something called the TEKOS. I don't know if this is the right pronunciation, but it's TEKOS, TEKOS School in Russia. And it's very much what you're talking about, where it's in the woods and these kids all learn experientially and they're not siphoned off in grades. You have a pretty wide range of ages. And what they'll often do is to hammer lessons into the older kids. What they'll have, the older kids will teach the younger kids, and they sit at these round tables. So I know maybe your youngest is a toddler, so might not be quite at this stage yet, but is there any, do you do any of that, or do you plan to do any of that where there's interaction amongst your boys and they're teaching and playing off of each other?
Yeah, actually that happens naturally. It's been happening a lot more this past year. It is amazing, and you're kind of helping me remember that So my toddler, I mean, beginning at like age, as soon as he could hold a colored pencil, was wanting to mimic his older brothers with their copy work and, you know, writing, practicing their cursive and things like that. So they naturally want to do what the older ones are doing. And, you know, it's great for the older kids to feel it is kind of a good way for them to gain confidence and teach what they've learned. And it also can help kind of solidify it, what they've learned in their mind as well when they're teaching it. So absolutely, that happens naturally. And I encourage it wherever I can. I think that's awesome. I haven't heard of the Tico school though. That sounds really awesome. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Again, I'm not endorsing it because it's not like we did some deep analysis of it, and we don't know if there's some other elements that we wouldn't agree with, but the concept is interesting, and it definitely deserves some thinking about what they're doing there. Now, we'll switch gears a little bit. I can't believe we've already been on an hour. It's flying by. And Jason and I were saying before the show how we were amped up because we were doing PWR with Mark before. It was like the old days when we did TAP and PWR. Back then it was called This Week on the Alt-Right, right back to back. But in this time of continuing lockdowns, I was looking at some of the themes that have been on your Hearth and Helm show, the podcast and live stream that you do. And one of those was mental health. And I'm curious if you can maybe share just a few highlights. If obviously people are interested, they should go listen to the whole episode. But what kinds of things you and your friends were talking about on that show, and what's kind of keeping you and your family grounded, and things you might have seen other friends of yours or family members struggling with during everything going on right now, and tips or advice for staying healthy through all this, or getting through this crucible of all the anti-white stuff going on in the world, and then this added stress of some people, depending on where they live, not having as much range of travel or be able to see loved ones. I'm pretty good where I am, but sometimes I forget our friends and loved ones in Europe. Some of our friends in Europe, these lockdowns are pretty harsh. I mean, some people in the Keith Woods was saying on PWR last week in Ireland, he can only go like 5 kilometers outside of his house right now.
Oh gosh, I can't even imagine, to be honest with you. I can't imagine how difficult that would be. I feel so fortunate that I do have, you know, I'm out here in a rural area. Oh gosh, yeah, my heart goes out to those people on lockdown right now. That's so wrong. It's so wrong. Well, gosh, yeah, I don't recall everything from that episode, but the first thing that always comes to my mind is just body movement and the importance of moving our bodies. You know, blasting your music up loud and dancing, dancing like no one's around. I mean, I know that might sound silly, but there's
energy.
Yes, well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. We have to keep that blood flowing, and you know, picking up a new hobby. I mean, it's a great time to read. I also just diet is so important for mental health. Cod liver oil is something, you know, that our ancestors were getting in their diets. That's super important, especially if you're not going outside and getting your vitamin D naturally from the sun.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I highly recommend people supplementing their vitamin D through cod liver oil, and looking into the Weston A. Price Foundation is essential for understanding the ways that our ancestors prepared and consumed their foods. It's so important. And I mean, beyond that, gosh, I'm at a loss for other things. I mean, picking up gardening, yes, but how is that going to work for someone stuck in a city flat? I suppose for people stuck in city flats, it's the time to try to take that, you know, anger and sadness and resentment and try to turn it into something positive, like maybe getting creative, like I said, picking up a new hobby, or trying to learn a new art. I mean, we are lucky, fortunate, I should say, that nowadays you can take online classes to explore and learn, you know, all sorts of fine art type stuff like that. So picking up an instrument, playing music, you know, and also just not isolating, you know, don't shut yourself in. It's the worst thing. You've got to have a good communication line with at least a good friend or two, or a forum that you're a part of, or some sort of community online. You know, the No White Guilt community, the Going Free community is a good one for that. But Yeah, just staying positive, and I guess ultimately for me, on a very personal level, it's my spiritual connection that helps guide me in everything. It's feeling the connection to my ancestors, connection to the long lineage of our folk and all of the hardships that we've endured. And whether it was the Ice Age, the plague, wars, just all of the horrible atrocities that have occurred over millennia. And we're still here. We're here because our ancestors were strong, and we have to stay strong for the future generations that are to come. We just have to, so just don't despair, don't give up, try to stay positive if you can. It would be the only advice I guess I could offer.
Well, a theme that I'm noticing that kind of connects what you've been saying is movement and circuitry, like you were talking about with the dance. It's whether literal and figurative, whether you're like literally getting up and moving around, dancing around and stretching, walking, making sure your feet touch the earth, being outside in the sun, or the connection, as you said, picking up the phone and talking to a friend, that's communication, that's moving. I think people get really depressed when mentally and physically and spiritually there's no movement, even spiritually. So you were saying that through your faith, there's a vast connection to what came before you and ancestors and energy that's been passed down from generation to generation. That, in a way, a little more abstract, but I think it's still all the more real, is still, it's like water flowing. All of what you're saying, whether it's on a mental, spiritual, or physical level, is that it's moving. Your oxygen needs to move in and out of your lungs. The blood needs to flow in your body. We know that water, when it's still, that's when it becomes mucky, and that's when more bacteria, parasites proliferate in the water. So everything that you're talking about is a flow. And even though our physical space, depending on where we are, as mentioned earlier, some of us might have a more confined physical space. It doesn't mean just because you can't drive and go out in quite as far of a range as you used to, it's still on you to make sure that you incorporate that theme of movement into however you can. Even if you're in a small apartment, you could still do things to exercise, to move, to take walks. And then, as you said, on a spiritual level, call friends, learn something, be creative. I find being creative in any kind of way is going to loosen you up. Sometimes when you first started talking about dancing, it reminded me quickly of this. Sometimes when you're in a rut, let's say mentally, it's sometimes you can kind of start your engine by doing the opposite thing. So if you're mentally in a rut, and you need to do something intellectual or creative, sometimes exercising or moving or even just cleaning the house, you come back to the mental task and you'll feel clearer. Or sometimes the reverse is true too. If you're physically just, you need to do something, but you're lethargic, your body feels like lead. Well, if you read something inspiring, if you listen to music that you love, if you have that nice connecting conversation with a friend, then all of a sudden you're not as tired anymore. Magically, you seem to have this jolt of physical energy. So that's another trick that I think of sometimes too, is sometimes kind of like go to the opposite pole. If you're feeling a little mentally fatigued, do something physical, and vice versa. Jumping around a little bit in the short amount of time we still have, you had our friend Philosophicat on. She's been on the after party a bunch as well. We always love talking to her. I was very happy to see all of you join forces, and you spoke about femininity. A lot of people in the chat, of course, are very appreciative of the great mom that you obviously are, and taking care of your homestead with your husband. So just what are some of the themes that you all spoke about there? And without, sometimes people get too idealistic about these things. You don't want to live online and be unrealistic, too idealistic, like we're flesh and blood people. So what are some real world kind of ways that in 2021, in the world that we live in now, that women can reclaim their femininity and let that full force of what they are, that beautiful force of nature, that femininity, blossom in them and radiate it out into their lives with their loved ones?
Yeah, well, I should say I'm smitten with Philosophicat and very grateful that she came on Heart and Helm. And oh, is there an echo? Sorry. No.
Sound good to me.
Yes, and the work that she has done with her Revolt Against the Modern World series has been just very enlightening and interesting. So I highly recommend people go check it out. One of the things that struck me, that's really stuck with me, that she expressed in one of those creations that she made was that to be feminine, to fully embrace your femininity, you must give yourself over and devote yourself to another being a man. And I think that that's certainly something that we have a big problem with in the West today is this hyper individualistic attitude that everyone has, but especially women. It's all about just satisfying in the moment. How do I feel? And that doesn't work for me. And it's if this commitment doesn't feel good, then I'm just going to go and just drop it, and maybe I'll try something different or something new. And this is very antithetical. It's very unnatural to the way that our people have thrived and functioned for millennia. We were never just individuals floating around and satisfying, our various wants, in the moment. We were a cohesive people. We are still today, even though so much is broken, it's still there. And we have to kind of mend that back. So like I said, that really struck a chord with me. And, I've seen a lot of couples, sadly, they'll, get married and then it's like, oh, it's not working out. And so they just divorce. And especially if there are children involved, I mean, that is 9 times out of 10, I would say 99% of the time, unless there's some sort of really crazy severe abuse or, drug problems or something, there's very few reasons why people should actually divorce. And I see marriage as being it's such a beautiful thing. It is truly a sacred union, and to give yourself over to your children and your husband and to love them unconditionally. I guess that's, that is a major part of femininity, and it's something that's a learning process. We on Hearth and Helm sometimes we'll get comments occasionally where some women say, well, not everybody's perfect and this and that. And it's like, we're never trying to present ourselves as like, oh, we're these perfect wives who never lose our temper and have never once raised our voices to our children. But we believe strongly that we have a lot of undoing to do, like layers of an onion. We believe strongly that we have grown up with a lot of indoctrination and muck and mud. And this is not, maybe not everyone could agree to this, but I think that most of us in the West today, if we're really honest about it, we can say that we have had a lot of indoctrination, a lot of anti-white indoctrination, and that's deep. That's very deep. And so it can manifest in those ways of just like ending relationships, whether it's like a relationship with a man that you're involved with, or a friendship with another female. We have female friends and that sort of things. We do talk a lot about maintaining frith and the importance of that and the importance of forgiving. I love how Jason mentions this a lot on his streams, how, this is a movement of redemption. Like, we certainly feel that way. We're all constantly growing and changing and hopefully, ideally, trying to better ourselves and learn from our mistakes. And that's, something, I guess, on kind of a more deeper level as far as femininity goes. I think that we as women have a lot of work to do. And I think we should also have grace with one another as we are coming into our femininity more, as individuals, but also just as a group, as people.
Yeah.
We've got to end this hate between the sexes and this, also the hyper judgmentalism too. Like some women, maybe they feel like they're expressing their femininity best by wearing a particular style of clothing and decorating their house from, a certain historical era, and that's something they really love. Then we support that. That's great. If that's working for them and they're happy and they're thriving and they're married and their kids are happy, and that's great. Other women, maybe they express their femininity in a different way, in a different style, but that giving yourself over to another, the devotion, to your partner and to your children is the top example that I would give. And that's why homeschooling is one of those things. It's sacrifices. We do make sacrifices, and that's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing. It's gift for gift. It's not as though we're miserable. When we do these things, it actually makes you feel happy, like truly happy inside, because it's a loving thing. It's not a hateful thing. So I don't know. I mean, those are some of my.
It's an interesting thing to unthread. Part of it is just by your example. That's why it's important for all of us to be sharing what we're doing and learn from each other and inspire each other. Because if I may say, you're obviously, it's not like you're a shrinking violet. Like, you're still very feminine, but when you get up here, you know what you want to say and you express it strongly, not in any kind of off-putting masculine way, as appropriate for a woman, but there's a direction to what you speak about, and you're able to do it in a way that doesn't detract one iota from your femininity. And sometimes it's not just explaining, well, how do you do it? Because I would imagine that's a hard question. I know what it's like to be on the hot seat. I'm usually the one asking the questions. But it's hard to kind of like observe yourself and analyze yourself, especially in real time on a stream. I know these are difficult questions, because I mean, I think about this too. That whole serving thing, because I do understand that, where as a man, you see a good deal of it in what I do publicly, but there's very much a direction and a purpose and a mission that I'm on. And so I can understand that in a certain way, a woman, of course, in my life supports that. And it's kind of like I'm providing the arrow, like the direction we're going in. And she also inspires that and is part of that as well. And I know that Philosophicat has spoken about that. We spoke to her a little bit about her feminine and masculine series as well a couple of years ago on tap. So it's like, on the one hand, someone like me, of course, wants a woman that understands I have this mission and isn't going to be giving me friction. But at the same time, I'm a curious person and I like to communicate and check in on things and talk to the closest people in my life. And I wouldn't want a woman who is just like a wallflower, just like, yes, okay, whatever you say, because there's all of these different nuances. And this is what I mean about people getting into this very like black and white paint by numbers kind of thing online. It's like, well, this didn't work and we're in this dire straits now. So we get to this very crude, very childish, well, women just have to shut up and just do what they're told. Then it's like, guys, come on, you sound like bratty 11-year-olds. I didn't even talk like that when I was 11. It's like, get off the internet and get off into real life a little bit. So it's these interesting weavings, because it's like you still have a certain strength and agency as a woman, but there is that love and that support and that devotion. I'm listening to how you there's also just spaces for men and women too. Obviously, with your kids, like everything you were talking about with homeschooling before, it's interesting, and I'm sure on an intellectual level, I could sit down and say, okay, with my kids, I might have to do X, Y, and Z, and this is how I would plan my day. But trying to imagine like the day-to-day as a man, like having to like deal with the kids and teach them, it sounds like a different planet to me, and it's not like I'm a loving person. I'm a compassionate person, but it's so clearly women are designed to be dealing with young children in that way that just a man isn't. I can love children in a different way, but the thought of like day in and day out having to like take kids around and give them lessons like that, I'm just like, even hearing you talk about it is like, woo, that's a different world to me, So to whatever degree is appropriate, of course, because I know some of this is personal, but is there anything that you can share about that dance between being someone who you obviously you have something to say, you're not a weak woman, but also I'm sure there's times when you support your husband and kind of you're kind of the wind beneath his wings, as like he's setting the sails for certain directions in your family. Is there anything you could speak to about that?
Yeah, that is interesting and quite a big question.
I know it's a mouthful.
First of all, I should say with the teaching the kids all day, you forgot about the snacks every 15 minutes. That has to happen too, because they're really hungry all the time. So it's like whack-a-mole, like they keep popping up. I'm hungry. Now I'm hungry. Now I'm hungry. So,
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could do that, man.
It's so funny. Well, my husband says I'm a pushover too, because I do tend to give in. I know I should be very strict and say no snacking in between meal times, but I'm like, okay, go ahead. So yes, well, I guess first of all, I would say that I'm very grateful that my husband and I, gosh, I mean, we have been together 15 years now. And honestly, that's just uncommon. I hardly meet any other couples who've been together for who are around our age, who've been together for a long time. So
beautiful thing. You should tell him if he wants to show his face, he should come on one time and say hi and tell us some of his secrets of how constructing a beautiful relationship that you have. That's wonderful.
Oh, well, yeah, he is more of an in-person, face-to-face kind of a guy. So hopefully you will have the chance to meet in person one of these days soon. But
I'd love to.
Yeah. But I guess I would just say, gosh, okay, so skipping around here. We, I mean, I suppose I am a strong woman, and I know I'm not supposed to say that. You kind of touched on that, how we have in the sphere, there are these kind of black and white viewpoints on that. And, there's a meme, and it's making fun of like the strong woman, right? And I get that. But, I am a strong spirited woman, and that's just who I am. There are different types of women. And this is one of the things, bringing back Philosophica's work, how she talks about the Demeter type, and then the, oh gosh, what's the other goddess's name? I forgot now.
Aphrodite.
Yes, Aphrodite. Yeah. The Demeter.
By the way, you can be strong as a woman.
Yes, right. And there is a such thing as, personality differences, and some women are more outgoing than others. And as you said, you desired a woman who might not just be a wallflower, who maybe does challenge you from time to time. Well, I would say this. I mean, my husband and I are best friends. I mean, he is my best friend. He's the only person in the entire world who I trust. I don't care, how long I've known somebody and I consider them a friend. That's great and all. But as far as like, just, excuse me, but your ride or die, like, trusting and best friend, we are so tight. And yes, over the years, like we have challenged each other, and we've grown together. Like we grow, we challenge one another, we support one another in our personal hobbies and endeavors. He's supportive of the things that I'm interested in doing. And so, he loves the Hearth and Helm podcast. He's been supportive of that. And, he also has his personal interests and hobbies and friend circles and that sort of thing. And of course I support that. And as far as the feminine aspect coming back into play, yes, women are naturally the nurturers. And I can't imagine not nurturing. I guess I feel sorry for women who are lacking that because of all of the modern indoctrination, women who can't feel what it feels like to nurture, another, like your husband, to care for them, to love them. I mean, and when I look at his face and I see him and I take him in and I'm just like, you are such a beautiful being. And like, when I see the other beautiful men in the white positive sphere, our folk, our people, the men have been so mistreated, and it's actually really heartbreaking. And the amount of hate that has been directed towards them it's unnatural. And I guess I just would say to any like maybe new young women, or not just young women, but if there are any women listening who have kind of just come into this and are just now kind of waking up to all of the anti-white indoctrination, that's something I would really want them to consider. Just how much indoctrination have they received that is hating our men, hating the men, hating men for being men. And you also mentioned the importance of men and women having separate spaces too. And yes, like there are plenty of spaces where we thrive and do well together in the community aspect, but it is so important for women and men to have separate spaces too. Like, and one example that I love to give is like birth time. When women are having children, giving birth, when new babies are born, only women are able to really be there emotionally fully in the way that the birthing or pregnant mother really needs. A lot of guys, we're also isolated, right, in these nuclear families, and pregnancy can be rough because the hormones are crazy, and what the woman is needing is like somebody she can cry to and be emotional with about all this stuff, and the husband often he can't do that because maybe it's not as though men aren't emotional. I don't mean to say that, but in that nurturing way, and this is where you would have like your mother, your grandmother, your sister,
who have been through it, of course.
Right, exactly. And men are just different. Like there's another common theme, it's kind of a meme, and you hear about, I'll hear this from some kind of mainstream modern women, like, I always have to plan our dates, they'll complain. I'm always the one that has to plan the dates. He never plans the dates. And I guess like I would just say, well, then maybe you're better at planning the dates. And as long as you're both having a nice time on the date, then who cares if he didn't come up with the idea on his own? Who cares if it wasn't a storybook where he laid the picnic blanket out and brought the wine and the flower petals? It's just, I don't know.
Just to round that out a little bit, though, don't you think that the deeper desire there is, again, she's craving the man giving that direction? Because I could understand that on a more fundamental level.
That is true. That's very true, because women do want men to lead, and that is a big one. And it's kind of like a taboo thing that, you're not supposed to say, because you don't want to imply that men aren't doing a good enough job or aren't leading. But yes, it's very important.
Can I just quickly key into one thing that you said? Because you said a phrase that was essentially the nub of what I was trying to get at when I was setting up the question, because we know what it means for a woman to nurture her children. We can picture what that means and what that looks like. And you spoke a little about the homeschool aspect earlier tonight. You said this key phrase, nurture your husband. What does that look like a little bit? Nurturing your husband?
Well, I mean, on a basic day-to-day level, it's like just being supportive, showing appreciation for how hard they're working in whatever way that is. I mean, around here, not only is my husband working at his off the farm job, but he's busting his butt here at the farm and to provide for us. And, no one wants to work hard and sacrifice for their family and not feel appreciated. White males today have so many things going against them in this world, and there needs to be a sanctuary, and that sanctuary has to be home with a loving wife, and men are not just like these hard, non-emotional beings. They also want to have a hug and have touch and these things that help all beings thrive.
I think this came up, Jason, I don't know if we talked about this. I feel like I talked about this. I can't underestimate, and in a broad sense, I guess you could say, but not in a specific sense. I'm not speaking sexually, of course. That I could just tell, even if it's just like on the back of my neck, I can tell a female touch from a male touch. Like, even if I didn't see the person, there's just this, I can't explain how important it is for a man to feel that nurturing, soft, feminine energy. It's like, it just soothes your whole being. And it sounds like you're also saying some of the things you provide for your husband would be, in my language, I don't know if there's better words for it, but celebrating him, honoring him, of course.
Yes, and cooking. If you can cook, my husband really appreciates that I cook good food for him. I know that it sounds. Yeah,
it's not just functional. It's not just functional. I've seen it. It's really how it's an art form. Women can really communicate their love and care through food. Absolutely. I think we lost your video.
No, we didn't. We did. She's grabbing a charger, and
Okay.
I will give a just make a couple of points and then come back to these wonderful financial gifts with questions, I believe, and some laudations for Sarah. I would just like to say what struck me that Sarah was saying, and folks, if you have any financial gifts with questions, that might be all that we have time left. We'll be tapping out at exactly 7:45 Eastern Standard Time. So questions without financial gifts might end up being passed over because we want to make sure that everybody who is financially gifted gets their time in the sun naturally. But I just want to quickly say that what we really have, I mean, and Sarah was touching upon this, is that in the West, we have a situation where women dominate legally and societally, and they take that power into the home. And if we are going to survive, a big part of our survival, the reclamation of our people, the recapture of our destiny, it is going to be a result of our women overcoming this part of anti-whiteism, which has enthroned them as these leaders, as these absolute tyrants in the relationship with a man. It is disgusting. My entire life has been nothing but hearing about these stories of it, just the opposite, absolute minuscule, and seeing it all around me. These women dominating and the reason why men are gelded, are white. There are no white men anymore. The reason why the white men that are left are mostly without women is because the women are in the home dominating the men. Women in the relationships are dominating the men, and then they're telling the men what to do, how to behave, according to her instincts, according to the fear of what the mob thinks, according to all of these different things that have so much more importance for a woman, genetically, spiritually, whatever it might be, in her dealings with children, in the way she is gifted to be able to deal with children and the family and etc. Now that has become how we deal with society, and that simply does not work. We need men being men, and right now, unfortunately, you want to know a great example for any ladies out there. I mean, first of all, you have to be if you're a woman and you are saying, "Well, women don't dominate," you are lying. Or you're to yourself and you are aware of it, or you're lying to yourself and you're unaware of it. Because everybody knows, I mean, you're at like the family get together, the whatever it might be, the Thanksgiving or whatever it is, one female get upset and everybody there jumps up to make it okay for her. A man gets upset, nobody cares. A man gets upset and people are like, well, screw him. Let him be pissed off, and maybe one or two go out. They want to try to just calm things down. Everybody moves when a female gets upset. What can we do? How can we make it better? The relationships are not working on a grand scale across the West because men get into these relationships and then women begin telling them, they begin controlling through manipulation, just through outright sheer dominance, through it's going to be my way or the highway, through the fact that she can always call on law or society to support her in her domination of the man. And over the years, and even months, he becomes increasingly gelded. And we no longer see a male there. And everybody, we see this joke of, well, is she happy? Because then we're happy. You are a loser if you say that.
I hate that. And whenever I've heard men say that, I push back on that.
Oh my God, yeah. If
happy wife, happy life. I'm like, oh my God, come here. We have to talk.
Yeah.
Not that I don't want my woman to be happy, but it's the whole mentality.
Right. It's the happy tyrant, happy life. Happy dominator, happy life. That's what these gelded, feckless losers are saying. So we're going to have to this is a big issue. It's a big part of anti-whiteism. And because anti-whites have set up society so that women have this legal dominance and this social dominance, White women are going to have to take it upon themselves to not dominate their men, because the only answer a man has to that is to walk away from her. That's the only answer to end the relationship, to just walk away, because that's the only thing she can't still control if she decides to do so. She cannot chain him to the house anymore. You know what she can do, though? If there's children, she can use the law to punitively follow him into perdition. So white women are going to have to make the decision to assume the role that they are supposed to assume in most relationships, so that men and women fit together harmoniously. They fit together physically, they fit together spiritually, they fit together intellectually, they fit together in all of these ways, and it is a beautiful thing when they do. We do not have that. We have sheer domination by women every single place I turn, and it is disgusting. I've told the story, I don't have time to tell it right now, but I've told it many times about the gigantic Nordic Superman human being at the gym who was built like a monster, this wide and 6.5 feet tall and beautifully muscled, and his little tiny wife told him what he was going to do with his life. Disgusting. And the reason he had to obey, because the law and society would side with her. So it's obviously a serious issue. Let's get on to some of these wonderful financial gifts. We have a great name here. This is so splendid. Big Hair Tsunami, right out of the 80s. I love it. Big Hair Tsunami, financially gifting $20. Thank you so very much. And saying everything that Big Hair Tsunami wanted to say with those $20. We have Art Acrobats, financially gifting $10. Thank you, dear brother. Another great participant in service to white well-being. Says, please get people to type 10 for the victims. I guess that would be out in Colorado. I guess there were 10 white people.
Yes.
Were they all 10? I mean, all were white, all 10?
That is what people in the chat are saying. I haven't looked at all the news stories.
Well, whether they're white or not, for all the victims.
It's still victims. Exactly.
So let's give a big 10 to all of the victims, irrespective of their races. If they are all white, I will be on fire after the show with fury over the anti-whites shutting this making this into a hush crime. And make sure that's how you share it, folks, so that you have the premises that put you on a thought chain to win those discussions with anti-whites. We're going to jump over here to Entropy, and we've got some great financial gifts. Yiz the Eunuch over here with $10 financial gift. Thank you, dear sister. Another American sawbuck for another American hero of white well-being, the great Sarah Dye. I've been sharing with her local families around here to hopefully inspire folks to become self-sufficient, as well as expose more people to white positive language ideas. Go team. Sarah, anything you want to say to Yiz and the idea of the teamwork and spreading white well-being?
Yes. Hello, Yiz. And thank you. It's good to hear from you. I appreciate the work you're doing as well. And so appreciate your kind compliments. And yeah, it's all about the teamwork for sure. It's really important.
Absolutely. There's no single champion in service to white well-being. We're all champions, and we're going to move down the field, or we can use any sort of analogy you want, but we're going to make it happen all together. We have Iraq syndrome. That sounds like somebody who maybe had been in war. And I'm sorry to hear that. Financially gifting. Let's get a round of applause. A big round of raucous emojis for Iraq syndrome. Financially gifting $80 US. Thank you so very much. My uncle was a Boer in South Africa and grew up on a self-sustaining farm. At the age of 12 or 13, he was already extremely responsible. He would lead workers on the farm, drove himself to school. No need for homeschooling then. Does America still produce such men? Do you think it's a good, best country to try to make this kind of future? Thanks. Sarah, that's to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard things similar to that about the Boers and the farmers in South Africa, that they are some of the hardiest people. And yeah, that's a huge inspiration, and it's a huge challenge that I will accept, as far as whatever I can do on my end as a mother with my sons. It's yeah, we've certainly lost a lot as a people, but I do have hope that we can get back to that. And hard times make strong men, as the old worn out but still very powerful phrase there. And that's that's certainly a goal of mine. I'm training my eldest right now as much as I can to kind of pick up some of the slack on the farm, the things that my husband and I normally do. So ideally, we can try to set them up to where they can have a functioning small business of some sort, or trade, maybe go to a trade school or something, so that they can get started on the right foot with their adulthood, which is not something my husband and I had at all. So,
May I just add the question about America and if it's the best? The thing is, as we say here all the time, as Jason has so well articulated, we all Westmen have the wellspring of the West within us. So America, Australia, South Africa, southern cone of South America, Europe, wherever we are, wherever we've traveled around the world, removing the poisons and getting back in touch, rekindling that spirit, that potential is there anywhere. It's in us.
That's right. Amen to that. Very well said, brother. We have Anon financially gifting $10. Thank you so very much. And Ryan's here. Thanks to Going Free, I am no longer an antique nationalist. I used to feel shame and guilt when I had those views. That is no longer the case with Going Free. I feel reinvigorated. Thanks for the long hours you put in streaming. Here is a token of my appreciation. Well, thank you so much to that, Anand. That is very meaningful. Thank you for coming away from that garbage. Your life will be infinitely better because of it. And yeah, your testimonial there is you're admitting something that so many of them and Aunt Nats won't admit, and that is that you actually felt shame being the bad guy in somebody else's story. They all feel it, and where they don't feel it, that's because maybe they're psychopaths. But who would want to play the villain in somebody else's story? So thank you for being a healthy human being, and thank you for the testimonial and the courage to share the truth about how that felt, and now how Going Free, you are reinvigorated, as you say, and you are most welcome. Let's get our great raucous emojis out once again, ladies and gentlemen. For Joseph, great to see you, dear brother, financially gifting $50 to White Wellbeing. 50, thanks, Joseph. Just started my vegetable garden this week in buckets and raised beds. Great topic today. Well, that was fortuitous for you, wasn't it, dear brother? Sarah, what would you like to say? Maybe some tips here, some things to look out for as Joseph works with his vegetables.
Well, congratulations. That's fantastic. You can certainly do a lot in a small space with buckets and raised beds. Just make sure that your buckets have drainage holes in the bottom of them. And my number one recommendation for all vegetable gardens is mulch. It does wonders for keeping the weeds down and holding the moisture in, so you don't have to water as often.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And good luck.
That's the best. That's the best part of it. Good luck, Joseph, and get some photos and share with us of the wonderful food that you'll be bringing forth. The wonderful one and only Tall Kevin is with us. $5 financial gift. Thanks, brother. How do you defend against untrue criticism that children are not properly socialized? And here we were talking about that just a little earlier, brother. Are not properly socialized who are homeschooled. How do you advocate homeschooling to others? What are your main selling points to tell other families of the benefits of homeschooling? Sarah.
Well, there are many. Yes. The number one is that you can, protect them from the anti-white propaganda. That's the strongest one. That may not be one, whether or not you're ready to talk to friends or family members who are challenging you. I don't know if you could, broach that topic with them, but Yeah, the socialization, as I said earlier, it's a total myth. There are tons of playgroups, and you just need to get plugged in. So find the homeschool group for your state. There's also a nationwide one. I think it's HSLDA. It's the Homeschool Nationwide Association, which I don't know, I'll post that on our Hearth and Helm social media again if people want to find it there. And that is the way to get plugged in. That'll have all your resources for you, and you can connect with other people in your community, other parents, talk to them. Your kid will not have any problem being socialized. It's an absolute myth. I mean, you could be busy every day of the week doing activities with other homeschoolers. You may have to drive a little bit, but that's okay. That's just a part of it. So yeah, don't despair. The socialization myth. I mean, and again, benefits, it's like one-on-one education. You can't go wrong. You can customize your curriculum for your child's particular learning needs. I mean, I could go on and on about the benefits of homeschooling.
Yeah, and I would also say you don't necessarily, in conversations like this, Kevin, you can start off by don't even seed the socialization idea to them. Sarah's making a great point in these folks who homeschool. They do involve their children in a lot of different activities. There are homeschool groups. There are also sports and et cetera that homeschoolers play and engage in, and beauty pageants, all different kinds of things where the children are put into environments with other children of various ages, as Sarah was talking about a little earlier in our time together. But I would go straight to the point that these, whether public school, private school, whatever it might be, what children are exposed to is bullying. And what they learn to do is to cower to the bullies. And there are going to be children, especially if there are, we'll say, for the ear being against the door, that there could be other children with other biospirits present, and they may mature faster, and they would be able to use their physicality to push your children around. And of course, that can happen within our own group, and no one is going to be present to a teacher is not going to put a stop to that. We hear about this all the time. That's why there's such an issue with bullying. So essentially what your child learns when you go to public or private school is how to be bullied, how to cower to a bully. And then what happens when they go out into work? What happens when they try to start a business? What happens when they run up against the government bureaucracy? What happens when they're trying? So it's all of these things. They just learn to give up. They learn to give in. They learn to be compliant. No, instead, you be present during the formative years of their life. Have adults interact with your children so they learn how to interact as an adult. Childhood is really training to be an adult. You're only a child that long. You're an adult for the rest of your life. So I would start off with going after the premise that your interlocutor is making. And that is that, well, if you go to school, then you learn how to be social with everybody else. Well, you learn to be beat up. You learn to be pushed around. You learn to be intimidated, unless you've got the biggest, meanest kid in the class. But that's just a suggestion, brother, and best of luck to you. We have, Sarah, did you want to say something?
Oh, yes, just really quickly, I wanted to add another talking point that you can, if you're having trouble explaining the reasons why you want to homeschool, you can protect the children from the early sexualization that is so common in public schools today. That's a really big one. So, I mean, it's serious. I know we don't have time to go into it now, but yeah.
Well, we will take the note down and we will get back to it the next time we have you on. But that's a great point, because absolutely, that's the sexualization of our children is absolutely despicable. The innocence is imperative to becoming functional adults. So thank you so very much for mentioning that. We have another financial gift, and I think it might be the final, and then maybe a question over on the question widget. We'll see. We have Bigot Smalls financially gifting $3. Thank you, dear brother. And he says, you don't need to read this. Thanks, Bigot Smalls. $3 financial gift, and I didn't even need to read it. But over here on the question,
is it appropriate to read anyway, or was it for your eyes only?
No, it's just that. It's just those words.
Well, there you go.
But he does say
Very
over
clever.
here,
just like his name.
He does say thank you to Sarah. I see over here on the side. It looks like so. Thank you so very much. We have Mestizo says, "Hail Tap, hail Sarah Die," with an exclamation point. I enjoyed this week's episode of PWR2, and too bad Trovo was glitching at the beginning. Well, Trovo is still garbage, and they're working on it. We'll see what ends up happening. And then we have Greek Man just giving us a Promethean hails. And that perfectly rounds it out as we are at tap out time. And Sarah is going to give us her final thoughts and then let us know what she might be working on in the very near future and where you can find this wonderful woman.
Oh. Thank you so much for having me on again, you guys. It's really been a pleasure. And it's very much an honor. Thank you so much for the kind compliments from the chat. And yes, you can certainly follow what I'm doing with my co-host Carissa over on Hearth and Helm. And I think we're actually live streaming later tonight about raising your own chicks.
Oh.
A lot of people are getting baby chicks right now and wanting to start their own flocks. So we're going to be talking about that. And we've actually started doing a lot more kind of just short off the cuff videos because we are busy moms and trying to kind of, put the information out there that we want to share and combining that with all the stuff that's going on. For instance, my co-host just had a baby, which is very exciting.
Oh, congratulations.
So please
Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, I will pass that on to her if she's not still here in the chat. But thank you. Yeah, just check out Hearth and Helm. If you're in the area, which is Southern Indiana, and you're interested in produce, please do check out Schooner Creek Farm. And also an exciting new development is that I think we're actually going to potentially open up for a couple of little farm tours this year and hands-on workshops for some of the gardening techniques that we do. So that'll be exciting.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, I put the link to Schooner Creek Farm's website in the chats, and specifically there's a donate page because, again, if you want to hear, Sarah and family have been through a lot and they're still dealing with a lot. And we spoke to that a little more specifically on her first appearance last June. If you were listening on our website, of course, you can go search Sarah's name. Increasingly, I'm recently trying to, when I post a tap, if the guest has been on before, right in that post, aside from the guest links, I'm also trying to remember to link to their previous tap appearances. So trying to make it as easy as you can, less clicking and less searching for you. As Jason and I do a lot to catalog all of this. As mentioned, every tap is on our site, theafterparty.tv. You can search guest names. Sometimes people say, hey, you should have this person on. And we're like, they've been on twice already. You got to go check out check out the search bar, or you can search by topics. All the posts are tagged. My own site is thegreatorder.com. So aside from these wonderful shows for the after party I do here with Jason, there's the other projects that I do as well. So if you want to delve more into that, if you want to get in contact with me, follow different social media, then my own site is thegreatorder.com. We heartily recommend that you bookmark all of the sites. Our shared site, my site, Jason's is nowhiteguilt.org. Got a nice little makeover recently. And if we ever need to get in contact with you, if we really got locked out of all social media at once, it's best to join the mailing lists. We really don't send out that many mailings, but it's occasionally a check-in with some info. But it would very much come in handy if we were really nuked all at once, if there was some kind of doomsday event across all of the coordinated social media platforms. As mentioned, and I put this link in the chat recently as well, I'm on with our own Yiz the Eunuch on her Corner Club this Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern, and that is 5 o'clock in the UK, because we're still an hour closer since the UK does not go into daylight savings until Sunday, the 28th. But I don't know about you all. I am feeling good. It's in spring. We're in spring now. Sarah, I know you have a lot to do with the farm. As you were saying, it's a busy time for all of us. I'm trying to juggle a lot, change my schedule up, change some things, but hopefully in the longer run, I'll be even more productive and more effective. I wanted to have some more songs out by now. I'm a little perturbed at myself that it's March and there's no new songs for 2021, but I'm working on a lot of music right now, and you should hear some new things very soon. So, and I'll be doing a show with John Bruce Leonard, another Learning in Public episode soon too. So check out my social media for that. And they're usually announced a day or two before as a post on my site, again, thegreatorder.com. So I'm done feeling like I'm a used car salesman. Sometimes you feel like you gotta get the information out there, but you stand up on a soapbox and tell everybody. But I know I'm in good hands. I'm in good hands because we have a wonderful community here in the chat. Sarah, it's always this extra crackle of energy in the chat when you're on. I mean, we know you're a busy mom, but we'll have you back on as often as we can. It's wonderful speaking to you, getting your perspective.
It is.
And people really love it. So thank you again to you and your family for giving so much of your time tonight. We know how busy you are. Send your love to your boys and your husband from us, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, and thank you all for showing up today, and thank everyone for financially gifting. It is most appreciated. I thank everybody who were commenting in the live chat as well. And don't go anywhere, because I am clicking right now and I'm putting the link to Sarah's show. She is starting at 8:15. Head right over there and make sure you subscribe to her channel and then learn about baby chicks. It was fantastic as always, folks, and we look forward to seeing